Welcome to the Driven by Us podcast, driving change in STEM and media within automotive and motorsport. This season, we'll be speaking to key figures and inspiring role models within the industry.
Hello and welcome to the Driven by Us podcast, driving change in STEM and media in the motorsport industry. And today I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Calum Nicholas. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. That's a lovely intro. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for joining me. So it's the summer break. How are you finding a little bit of time off from a very chaotic F1 season?
It's been nice. This year I've tried to make the most of my time away. I said this is the first motorsport related activity I've done since I left Spa. So yeah, it's been nice. I've been trying to make the most of it and obviously getting ready for the season to come.
So let's dive into, I think, the start of your story. Did you always know that you wanted to get into engineering?
No, absolutely not. Like, honestly, I feel in some ways I sort of stumbled into something I love. When I left school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I sort of kicked around for a little while doing all sorts of other bits and bobs until I ended up at a garage working on cars, and I really enjoyed it. I think as a kid, I was always, that kid that liked finding out how things worked and breaking them in the process. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, once I was sort of working in the garage and just sort of really enjoying what I was doing, that was when it started. That was when the spark and sort of idea that perhaps it could be a long-term career.
Was there anyone in your family that, had an interest in like mechanics or anything like that?
Absolutely not. Like when I was growing up, my dad was a firefighter. My mum was in advertising. So there was nothing sort of around me other than the fact that I just always liked cars and bikes and anything sort of motorized. That was sort of the only reason.
And it wasn't, pushed on you at school at all? Because I remember my experience, they really pushed like STEM subjects. And that could be, from anything to make you be a doctor or an engineer or whatever it was. Did you have that same experience when you were in school?
Not really. I say you're quite lucky. Like I've always been like quite a critic of British education, and that I feel like we sort of fail to inspire people to take on STEM.
Yeah.
At my school, there was no interest whatsoever. Like I think once they were sort of preparing people who wanted to go and be doctors and lawyers, and there was very little sort of motivation for anyone who thought they might go and work with their hands, and go and do skilled labour and something like that. So yeah, I there was really nothing while I was at school.
Maybe that's like a generational thing, because obviously there's a number of years between us. So I think now they're
You're making me feel really old.
I'm so sorry, Calum. I'm really not trying to. But, now I think they're really trying to push sort of those environments. Mine was an all-girls school as well. Okay. So an underrepresented group, I think, in the STEM industry. I think they really, really tried to push it. So it's quite surprising that they didn't push it really, but you actually found your own way and you wanted to get into it. So what were those steps? You did A-levels as well, but it wasn't related.
No, I did A-levels that were like unrelated. I did English literature.
So different.
Yeah. Probably better prepared me for this than it did
exactly.
for racing. But yeah, it was once I was working with cars, it was either going to be one of those things where I was in a small little garage in North London. I was either going to be like doing that forever, like up to my elbows in grease, or there was an opportunity that sort of to discover racing that I had, like, and then it was just a choice of, well, if you're going to do something, let's try and do it sort of up here.
And how did that come about then? How did you go from working in a garage to then, I'm now in Red Bull Formula One team?
Well, I mean, it's a fairly long journey. I went back to college because obviously I said when I was at school, I hadn't sort of studied anything engineering related or racing related. I wasn't even watching Formula One until 2008. So it was like 2009. I went back to college at Silverstone, and then from there I sort of just found little opportunities to get to the racetrack. Like anything to go and help out at a weekend with a team doing this, that, or the other, like any job that they'd let me go and basically do for like 6 months while I was at college, and then eventually found myself like a first proper apprenticeship in motorsport. That was doing GP3. Obviously, what do we call it? F3 now.
Yeah.
FIA F3. Yeah. So I did that for about a year and a half. At the same time, I was lucky. I got to take on some ELMS, some Le Mans projects. I did Le Mans, and then after that, it was a case of just finding that first way to get your foot in the door of F1. And at the time, Marussia, who are obviously defunct now, but they were looking for a factory-based sub-assembly technician.
Right.
Sub-assembly work's sort of the thing that I love anyway. Having lots of the same assembly and preparing them so they're all the same and like that kind of stuff, like working on my own, just doing my little thing and seeing the work you've done afterwards, that's like right on my street. So I took that job, and I was there for another sort of 6 months before an opportunity came to get back on the race team and get to the circuit. So I was rear end mechanic for a couple of years on Jules Bianchi's car at Marussia.
Wow.
And then when Marussia folded, I just basically found myself scrambling, sending emails, letters to every team on the grid, willing to take on like absolutely any role to sort of stay in the sport. Red Bull had a factory-based position that was going on in their car build. I took that on. I did that for a little while before moving on to their support team. So I spent a year, my first year at Red Bull, I spent going to all the show events, doing all the demonstration runs, things like that, getting used to the way that the team worked. And sort of preparing to get back to racing. And then when that opportunity on the race team arrived, I just jumped at it, really.
And how did you feel? Because is there a lot of pressure when working with, such a big Formula One team? Did you ever feel like, oh, I'm quite nervous when I first started? Are those pressures still there today?
I think when I first took on the role that I do now, so doing engine assembly at the circuit, I'd never done engine assembly before.
Wow.
So I'd assembled pretty much every part of a race car other than an engine prior to taking on the job. Just because, like, when I was doing junior formulas, the engines are supplied built, so you only ever had to install them. When I did Le Mans, it was an external supplier that brought the power unit, and so I'd never had an opportunity really to get involved in it. With that, there obviously comes a certain amount of anxiety, or whether you don't want to mess anything up.
I can imagine, yeah.
But at the same time, I've always sort of been a believer that thrown in the deep end is the best way. I think, when I had like 4 races with someone who'd done the job previously. So I had like 4 races to sort of get my eye in and understand the workings of the race weekend and get ready for it. But once I was just doing it on my own, I don't know, I just focused on the job.
Yeah.
I
feel like I'm sort of similar in that aspect. Say if a job came my way that I don't know, if I've never done it before, I think I could do it, but you don't have that experience, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to take it, and if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well, and if it does go well, like where you are today, it goes really well, and you've set yourself up then. So is that the advice that you would give to someone, when first starting their engineering career?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go about it. I try and break things down into, the little bits, rather than trying to look at the whole thing and say, oh, am I going to do everything right? I try and say, right, well, I've just got to do these things right and this will be okay. And then I break it down and I just focus on the task at hand each and every time. And then hopefully everything comes together.
Yeah, I mean, how's your time been in Formula One? A number of years now. You joined Red Bull in 2015. How have you found that? I'm sure there's so many highs and so many lows and loads of stories that you can tell me, but how would you sum it up?
I'd sum it up as that I don't think my life would be as good as it is now if I'd not discovered racing.
Yeah.
Like I look at the fact that I've had the opportunity to, travel around the world 10 times and like you said, experience highs, lows, a world of different cultures, experiences. So that's sort of how I look at it, like for every bad day I can tell you about, I've got 10 good ones.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, if you can get that from life and from a job, it's not a bad way to look at it.
Exactly. I mean, how is that work-life balance? The Formula One season is super long, limited time off. Do you ever struggle with a work-life balance, or you think you've got that down now?
It's difficult. I wouldn't say I've got it down, just because as the calendar expands, it gets harder.
Yes.
Every time the calendar expands, or every year we look at the calendar and we say, oh, well, that's moved there and that's moved there, and you really are juggling your life around every time it happens. It's not about like, okay, yeah, I make sacrifices in my life to be able to go and do what I love, but it's not just my own sacrifices.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I met my partner in the paddock, so she understands to an extent, but she's also making like huge sacrifices every time I go away. And it's the same, same for my daughter. Every time I'm away, I sort of feel like I'm missing little bits of her life. And so the sacrifices get greater. In terms of managing it, I'd say you need to have an understanding partner.
Yeah, definitely.
it's probably the best way to go about it. I think that I try and look at what the goal is. Short-term pain, long-term gain is sort of the way I look at it. And if I say to myself, look, I had these goals. If I give up on them now, then I'm always going to think, what if I just
what
if I carried on for one more year? What if I did this? What if I did that? Whereas if I can stick it out for a little while longer, hopefully I'll get to a point in life where I can say, okay, I've done all that now. I can go and find something that's a little bit more life friendly.
And, you've been super successful, so it's like, why would you stop now? I'm going to keep going. I'm on a great track here.
I think it'll be my body that gives up on me before I lose the love for it.
So what is break down a Formula One weekend for me? Tell me about your day from practice to quali to the actual race.
Yeah.
What do you, if you can break it down, I guess it's a big question really.
Yeah.
What does that weekend look like for you?
So I'd arrive at a circuit on a Wednesday morning. Wednesdays and Thursdays are pretty much all build of the car. So you spend most of Wednesday getting all the main components of the car built. And then Thursday, a lot of your days spent legality checking everything. So we've got like loads of jazzy, expensive equipment to check that everything's millimetre perfect and where it should be, all the legality checks. And then on the rest of the Thursday, you just need to fire up, make sure the car's signed off, all of the pre-flight checks are done, a bit of pit stop practice on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of into it. And, if it's a normal Grand Prix weekend as opposed to a sprint, then your routine's very sort of the same each week. You're going to get through the first practice, engineer will send out any changes, you'll have a look and make sure there's no faults, anything that needs rectifying, get through P2. And we're quite lucky now. So when I first started in F1, the curfew periods were huge. Like you'd start your day on a Friday morning, you might leave the hotel at like 6:45 in the morning, and you'd still be in the garage at 1 a.m.
So it's super long hours.
That's how it was when I first started. Normally on a Friday when I first started, everybody would do an engine and a gearbox change on Friday night.
Yeah.
So you'd have your Friday engine, your race engine, and it was a massive workload. I used to dread Fridays. They were awful. And now with these curfew periods that the FIA have put in place, it's actually a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, more manageable for, the whole
Yeah, exactly. So you're sort of guaranteed at least 11, 12 hours away from the circuit.
Yeah.
As the calendar's grown, it's become, obviously,
a little bit more difficult, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it was. It was necessary, those periods. Otherwise, you'll always find work to do in a garage.
Yeah. Do you have any rituals before a race weekend? To really get into the zone, because like you say, even though you have the curfews now, it is still long hours regardless. Yeah. I'm sure it's very strenuous on the body, but also mental energy as well. Is there anything you do, or you would give any advice to anyone to be like, get this amount of sleep, or eat this amount of food, or anything like that?
I mean, look, in the hot countries, we're always reminded about staying hydrated, eating properly, all of those things. I'm terrible for it as well, because I've got a sweet tooth, so I end up drinking juice all day and not eating properly because I lose my appetite in the heat. So it's difficult. I think in terms of routine, I'm not superstitious. Like loads of people have asked me, is there stuff that you religiously do? And I don't really like superstition, but I have a routine from the beginning of the day. So I'll do my first jobs when I get to the garage on Sunday morning is filling oil in the car, things like that. Okay. And then I get into any admin I need to do for the next race. And I sort of, from that point on, I work up to pit stop practice. And from then, I don't do anything outside of my normal routine. Yeah. So I do pit stop practice, I prep to go to the grid. And from that point on, it is really focus. I just want to get to that first pit stop in the race. So that's always for me has been the biggest thing, is that once you're on the grid, you just got to think about getting that first pit stop done, and then after that it feels like autopilot. Yeah,
then you're just completely in the zone.
Yeah, that's it.
Has there been any sort of big challenges, on a race weekend that you've really struggled, and you and the team had to come together and really work together to get the result that you wanted for?
I mean, we've had loads over the years. I think.
I mean, it's racing, so
yeah, exactly. There's always
challenges.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
I think people look at it and they think, oh, well, over the last few years we've had it easy in the garage. And to be fair, over the last few years things have gone well, and the car's been really reliable. But either way, there's always a sketch. Like I say, that no race car's ever completely happy and needs nothing. There's always something that you're looking after or monitoring or trying to make sure is right. So there's always an incredible workload in the garage. There's things back when we were with our old engine supplier, it seemed like it was chaos every week.
Right.
There was always something. There was always a situation at some point through the weekend where both car crews would end up working on one car to get it out. Something where the team's always been really strong. Getting the job done in sort of tight time frames is something that we're quite good at. I wasn't on the crew at the time, but the crew that repaired Max Verstappen's car after he ventured into the barrier on the way to the grid in Hungary. I think that was that 2019? I think it was somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Like that was, it's a monumental effort. So there's always going to be instances like that where you have to sort of overcome a little bit of adversity and just get the job done.
And what are the sort of relationship like, between you and the drivers? Is there like a close relationship there?
It's always, do you know what? I don't know if it's just like a team thing, because I hear from
other teams.
Like friends of mine that work in other teams that like the relationships are always like good. Like I think people are really surprised by that. Like I think like people think, the drivers, they just rock up and drive and then leave. It's not like that at all, really. They're always going to be in and around the garage. You chat to them about things like that. Like you take a personal interest. I think anyone that you sort of spend that much time with, over the course of all these years, it would be odd to not sort of build a rapport and a relationship with
Well, then
people.
you see, all like the team photos after, someone's won or got a podium, and it does look like a small family.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's how it's really reflected.
I think we're a very close unit. Like, I think what we've done well with the team is that it's not just about everybody's skills, their technical skills. Their soft skills, their personality is what's made the team so strong. Like all of the different personalities that make up the garage are all crucial in their little space. It's sort of the sum of all the parts is sort of what is key to the sort of success.
I mean, it does really look like a family from the outside, when they jump in when they just come out of the car, they've got a race win, they give all the engineers a hug, and it's such a beautiful moment because it's a team sport at the end of the day. Some people do forget that, don't they? They think it's literally just the driver and that's it, and it can be quite easy because you don't actually see, the engineers all the time. It's quite easy to think, Red Bull is just Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, but it's a massive team. So you've enjoyed your time working with Red Bull?
Yeah, I mean, like I wouldn't want to do it. Like I've said for ages as well, I wouldn't want to have done this job anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things, there's been plenty of opportunities to go and do the same job in other places. But realistically, even if it's for, more money or whatever, it's the environment counts for a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, have you ever had any sort of barriers, even in Formula One now or when you were first coming into your career, like regarding, ethnicity at all?
So, look, I'd like to say no, never. It's always been wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's not reality.
Yeah.
When I didn't think about a lot of these things as sort of barriers or issues that I had until much later in my career. I think my focus was just on trying to get through it and ignore it and get it done.
Yeah.
Certainly something that I found quite difficult when I first started was sort of getting used to being pretty much the only black mechanic in any paddock I worked in. Like now we look at motorsport and we talk about diversity, and there is still work to be done, and certainly in making the environment feel more inclusive, there's work to be done. But I can tell you we've come a long way since 2009.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I always had as well, being like sort of the only black mechanic in a team or in a paddock in that sort of environment, was that then you're sort of expected to be the spokesperson for any sort of social or news issue that is about people of colour.
Yeah.
And, at 21, I wasn't really prepared for that, you know. Like now, I'll talk about all these things all day. So, and I think partly that's just to do with having more support around, but also to do with sort of understanding that without talking about all these stuff, all these issues, we're not going to make any progress.
And why do you think there was sort of like that lack of diversity? Is it because it's just not pushed at all, or those doors just aren't being opened?
I mean, for one thing, and something that I try and do something about is representation.
Yeah.
When I first decided that I was going to take on a career in motorsport, one of my close friends at the time literally said to me, he said, "Oh, mate, they're never going to let you in." Like, as Formula One was like, it was viewed as such an elitist club, like this old boys club, that with all the information that he had available to him at the time, it seemed like ridiculous that they were going to let somebody who wasn't from that sort of group to get involved in the sport. I'd like to think that I've done a little bit to sort of change that perception.
Definitely. I think you would, because you're a social media star as well. You really are. So, you do use your social media platform for good.
I try. It's one of those things, like I want my social media to be helpful.
Yeah.
And I try and sort of do stuff that's more informative than fun, but also like, you know, I don't want to bore people.
It's that fine line, isn't
Yeah,
it, really?
that's
It's like
it.
informative, but also fun content
Yeah,
at the
that's it.
same
And
time.
sometimes it's really difficult because, you know, when I talk about racing, I'm serious about it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little bit hard to
Yeah.
find the fun side of stuff. So when I do try and do that kind of thing, it's a good way to, like, things like this are great for sort of being able to have like a casual conversation and try not to make it too boring.
Get your personality out there. It's true. Honestly, I think I have the same issue, really, because obviously racing is quite serious. So if you're reporting, it is very, I think, structured, and it's nice to be a little bit more free-flowing, you know, doing things like this or on your social media, on TikTok or whatever it is. So it's nice to see that you do use your social media.
And it's you know what, it's one of the welcome changes that we've seen, like with the growth of the sport.
Yeah.
It was honestly like, it was so, when I first started the paddock, all the like photographers, the reporters, they were like all the same old people that have been there for like 20 years. Like there was no like teams weren't reaching out to content creators and saying, oh, come and experience this. And so it's been a welcome change. It's been nice.
Exactly. I do think now motorsport is really opening up. I don't know if you think the same, but in terms of everything, you know, diversity, equality, inclusion, all of those things, because you're seeing more girls get involved in motorsport, more people of colour. What do you think that we can do really to keep that traction going?
So for me, I always try and think of like the long term. I think, you know, there's some great resources out there, Driven by Us being one of them. You know, like these sort of communities, they didn't exist when I started. So like when James Dorner founded Driven by Us, my first thought was, wait, this is so long overdue. Like why has nobody got this sort of community together in the first place? So I think stuff like that is really useful. But also, you know, some of the other projects that have been sort of launched and sort of gained traction that look at long-term solutions. You know, so education, awareness, like all of these long-term solutions, I think if we just stick at it, over time, we're going to see a naturally more diverse paddock.
Yeah.
Like I've never been a fan of trying to solve a short-term solution, because for me, when you do that, it's just not lasting.
Yeah.
Like I think like I'm not going to be doing this job forever. You know, like I want to know that there are people coming through that are going to try and
carry it on.
That are going to try and sort of keep pushing this and keep sort of providing the representation that I didn't have when I started.
That's why I think social media, like going back to that point, is a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're on your phone, you're scrolling through and you see people that look like you in roles that you want to do in the future, it makes you think, oh, I can do that role then. You know, if Calum can do it, I can do it. Calum looks like me. Calum has a similar background to me. Then I can do it. And it's true. When you see this sort of elitist group, you're like, oh, well, how am I ever going to be able to touch that? So it's amazing to see all these barriers, I think, breaking down now. And you are a part of that. You really are helping to, you know, open these doors for people. Honestly, I think you're doing an amazing job.
But like, you know, you spoke about like barriers to entry, and there were so many like things that I hadn't even considered, like barriers that I sort of overcame by accident when I started. Like for me, still geography is such a massive thing.
Yeah.
You know, where all the teams are based outside of big cities, it becomes like a huge sort of barrier for so many people that want to go and get involved in motorsport. Travel, you know, it's not cheap. It's something that has to be accounted for, and accommodation and all of these things. And when I started, like one of the things that I did was I'd go to race weekends and I'd just sleep in my car in the car park.
Yeah.
You know, because like the cost of accommodation, or like its availability of where you want it to be.
When it's a race weekend as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Prices just zoom up, don't they?
Absolutely. Like, and this was something that I did like throughout my time in college, was just sort of, I just took my golf everywhere and I slept in it, and it was
the hustle.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do, really. If you have a passion, you just have to be on the hustle all the time.
Yeah.
But I find that, I don't know if you found it, but in motorsport, there's more people, you know, doing similar things like that. And I don't know if it is other sports as well, maybe just because this is our industry, we notice it more. But people are so passionate.
Yeah.
You know, like young people that really want to be an engineer or a presenter or whatever it is in this industry.
Yeah.
They'll do things like that. They'll sleep in their car and they'll do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah, I think, you know, like with a lot of other trades, especially like if you want to be in the technical side of F1, like a lot of other trades, your experience is so valuable.
Yeah.
So aside from any qualifications you've got to first start building that network, which means being there. You know, being in the room is such an important thing when you're trying to build a network. But just also sometimes just that little bit of going the extra mile, you know, to employers in the industry, it stands out.
Is there anything that you would have done differently in your career, looking back now?
Given the opportunity, the only thing that I would have done was to just discover it sooner.
Yeah.
That's honestly the biggest thing. It's why I try and do a lot with awareness of the opportunities in motorsport for careers, just because my biggest thing is that I wish I'd discovered it sooner.
Yeah.
You know, at the time, I didn't have to stay in school to do A-levels.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So,
I could have left after my GCSEs and found a racing job. And some of the really successful people I worked with at Red Bull, you know, they've been doing it for a long time. Like one of our chief mechanics, he was an apprentice at Jaguar when it was Jaguar when he was 15, you know, and that's probably the only thing that I'd choose to do differently was start earlier.
But I guess that's good. Then you can sort of use your story really to inspire people, because it doesn't matter, you know, whatever age, if you start it really young, if you go from, like you say, school and then jump straight into it, or you do college at a later date and study it, you can really achieve anything. It doesn't really matter.
No, that's it. And going to college later had its benefits as well. Like when I went back to college, I was like 20 years old. Everyone else I was at college was like 16, 17. So it made me a more mature student.
Yeah.
In turn, that sort of makes you more attractive as a potential for an apprentice, someone that's going to stick around and be interested in it in the long term. So yeah, it has its advantages either way. Just for me, I just wish I'd started sooner.
Yeah, because you love it so much.
I might be team principal by now. You never know.
Exactly. Did young Calum ever imagine that he would be here today?
I think young Calum didn't imagine a lot about what his life would look like. I was very much of sort of the thing that it will all just work out. And I guess I sort of got lucky that it did. It's not advice that I'd give people. Don't just blasé, not think about your life and how it's going to plan out. Don't do that. At the same time, I was always flexible with what I was willing to do. You know, like I knew that I didn't want to be in an office. I knew that I didn't like that. I discovered that early on. Other than that, you know, doing anything with my hands that would sort of interest me and be a little bit technical and would require a bit of skill, I could have ended up doing like a load of different stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But you weren't a 9 to 5 office.
That wasn't
type
going to
of
happen.
man.
I did it when I like first left school, when I just needed to put some money in my pocket.
Yeah.
It nearly killed me.
Some people just aren't, you know, made for that. I don't think I am either. I'm not a 9 to 5 sit down office type of person, because if you are hands on, you've got lots of energy, and I think obviously you've got lots of mental energy there. You know, you should do something with it, and obviously you have and been really successful in that.
I think especially if you like, I liked travel, so that was the biggest bonus to the sort of discovering racing for me. It was like I can go and work with my hands outdoors, do what I like, and they're going to pay me to travel.
Yeah. So is that one of, you know, the highlights to your job, you'd say, is traveling the world?
Yeah, I think so. I think as much as now I've grown up and I've got, you know, things and responsibilities at home and people that are sort of relying on me, it's become a little bit tougher to enjoy it all. But when I first started, honestly, like, so I think my first year in F1, I must have been 23. So it was like
exciting.
Yeah,
I
had no responsibilities at home,
Yeah.
you know. So it was a case of just go explore the world, do something that you're really enjoying, and get paid for it.
I mean, it's a dream, honestly. When you're that age, and they always say, you know, go and explore the world when you're young, and you did it, and you were getting paid for it. So you hit the jackpot there, seriously, Calum. What are the highlights, would you say, that you've had in your career?
I mean, I always like winning's really nice.
Of course. Who doesn't like winning?
Yeah, that's it. You know, I think the good years and the bad years, I think obviously when I first started at Red Bull as well, like it wasn't the good years, you know, like the
difficult times.
It was, you know, I was in for like 7 years of pain of getting Mercedes like kicking our asses every week. It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
So like when we finally got to a place where we could, you know, challenge for a championship and go out and win and do everything right, it feels a lot more of an accomplishment, you know?
What's been your favourite season that you've worked?
2023, without a doubt.
Yeah. You know, cruising through.
It wasn't, you know what, it's one of those things that, like, it was nice knowing every week that we were in a good position to go and win, other than Singapore. We knew we were screwed in Singapore. But other than...
become relaxed, though. Is the team then like, oh, okay, you know, we're at the front of the pack, we're winning. Do you ever take that mentality, or is it always like, doesn't matter if we're at the front and we're so far ahead in the points, we're still going to push for it?
Yeah, I think the nature of anyone who chooses to work in motorsport is going to be the kind of person that, regardless of what you achieve, you're going to say, oh, well, I could have done that. Like, so for me in 2023, I'm like, wow, you know, what we did was incredible. It was an incredible year. The car was amazing. Everyone was perfect. except for Singapore.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. It's always going to be like that.
Perfectionism.
Yeah. So like, whether it be performance in the pit lane or it be winning every sprint race or you're making sure you get every pole, there's always going to be something where you're like, oh, we could have been a little bit better there.
Yeah. But I think you need that, don't you? Because you don't want to start slacking off at all.
No.
And then you start dropping down the pack and go, oh no, what have we done? We have to start from the top. What about the 2024 season? How have you found it so far? Some difficult periods for Red Bull, but it started off quite well.
It's been, you know what, it's been good. And actually, it's fair to say that as a racing fan, because, you know, first and foremost, pretty much everyone in the paddock, we're just racing fans. So I can appreciate that this second half of the season is going to be exciting. It'll be better for me sat in the garage and actually have a race on our hands.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. As long as we win.
Have to win. All the non-Red Bull fans are like, no, we don't want them to carry on winning.
I think that's something, you know, partisan fandom is a bit of an issue at the minute. Like, I think when I first started, it was certainly more people were happier to enjoy like good racing, no matter how much, like no matter which way it turned out and the results. Certainly for me, I'm looking forward to a bit of competition. In the
How does a team overcome that? You know, are there some like personalities that actually quite struggle to get back on form? Or is it sort of, we're all in this together, you know, we've had a difficult period, we come back even stronger for the next weekend?
Yeah, I think that's basically how it is. And I think what people do is probably just try and make sure you're doing your bit as best as it can be done.
Yeah.
You know, like for me, the biggest thing is making sure all the work that I do is up to scratch. And I think if everybody does that, it'll be fine. You know, it'll work out. And there's always going to be things that are out of your control. Mm-hmm. Things are going to go your way. Things aren't going to go your way. That's racing. Mm-hmm. But I try not to just worry about the result. We had a bad result last week. It doesn't actually matter. Yeah. It's done
like
each week.
Erase out of your mind onto the next one.
Get to the circuit the next Wednesday. We go again. Yeah. We make the best of it. We try and make things work, and that's it.
So what's been the most difficult thing that you've ever found working with Red Bull?
I think the thing that's probably challenged me the most is probably pit stop performance.
Okay.
And not so much because the technicalities of doing a pit stop, but the pressure mounts. You know, it's been like 6 consecutive years we've won the DHL pit stop trophy. It's pressure that we've brought on ourselves. We like being the benchmark in the pit lane. Yeah. We don't want to lose that. So you do tend to start heaping a bit of pressure on yourselves to find bits performance here and there, and you have to try and sort of keep all that. For those 2 seconds that the car's in front of you, you've got to keep all that bottled up and focus. Again, it's a case of focusing on the task at hand. It's not easy.
It really is like a mental game, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, that's always been the thing that I've said about pit stops is probably the hardest. You know, once you learn, you know, the actions of what you're doing and the repetitiveness of trying to do the same thing, that becomes almost autopilot.
Just second nature to you then.
But keeping it, you know, sort of up here is always the bigger challenge.
Yeah, I can just imagine it is so difficult to always stay in the zone and just not let things affect you at all. Yeah. It's really hard to have that balance. So if you found it, then that's the perfect recipe, really.
Well, that's it. And that's the reason why I try and have like a pre-race routine.
Yeah.
You know, so anything that else is going on in the world or at home or in the pit lane or whatever, anything that's going from that sort of point on a Sunday where I'm on the grid, I have to just, for 2 hours, you just got to put that out of your mind.
Yeah.
You can come back to it. Let's just focus on the one thing.
So, Calum, do you have any unpopular Formula One opinions at all? Something that people won't really agree with you with at all?
Do you know what? It's tough. I feel like most of my Formula One opinions are quite popular ones.
People will agree with you.
Yeah, I think so. I think the one that I hold at the moment that's quite dear to my heart is that salaries should be out of the cost cap. That's probably like my foremost opinion at the moment. Yeah. I don't think I'll be honest with you. I don't think it should be controversial. My view on the cost cap and salaries being in it is that you've got supposedly the pinnacle of motorsport, which we should want the best and most skilled people to work in. Yeah. And I don't like the fact that the rules allow businesses in the sport to say, oh, well, we can't pay you what you're worth. Yeah. So yeah, that's
it's really limiting then, isn't it? To be honest.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, if engineers can go and say, you know what, I can go and do WEC, do 12 races a year and really not take much of a pay cut. It's like, how long can Formula One sustain that sort of pinnacle title?
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a lot of challenges within Formula One that, you know, people are really coming to the forefront and saying their opinions on certain things.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, Formula One, if you're listening, will address similar things like what we're talking about today, because the cost cap as a whole is a great idea, isn't it? But it's just that part.
Yeah, I think it was necessary to do something.
Just to bunch up the grid a little bit more.
I think, and I think it might take us a little while to really see if it does that in the long term.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing for me, I don't want to see those who sort of earn the least in the sport be punished by the rules.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any driver unpopular opinions at all? I can give you mine if that helps.
I don't really know. I don't think I have particularly.
Like a driver that maybe you love, but no one else really agrees with you at all.
I don't know. I think there's plenty of people that agree with me. I'll always have love for Daniel.
Yeah.
I miss him in the garage for a start. I think that regardless of where Dan ends up, I think that I'll always have that love for him.
Yeah. He's a great figure in Formula One. You know, even like away from the track, he's got great personality.
And I also think that, you know, in the right environment, he's incredibly fast.
Yeah.
So, you know, no one's ever going to change that opinion for me. Like, I saw it. You know, I got to see him at his best.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But maybe that is an unpopular opinion, because now people obviously are talking about Daniel Ricciardo of, you know, is he as good as we once thought he was? So I think that's your unpopular opinion.
You think so?
I'm going to go with that one. You do have like the mixed spectrum. You've got so many fans that love him or defend him to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And then you've got the other fans going, why are we still defending Daniel Ricciardo? So I think that's a good point.
Okay.
What about Romain Grosjean? I have to bring him up. He's one of my favourite drivers ever, which is very controversial.
Why is Romain Grosjean controversial? Like,
You know, he causes a lot of drama on track, which I think is great.
Yeah,
That's what we want.
I think a lot of people can take that title as well.
Well, exactly.
I always felt like Romain was all right. I felt like he was never really in a position to each and every week throughout a season give it a go at actually going out and winning each week and putting on the podium. But
I think I prefer the more chaotic drivers. Like I describe myself as Kevin Magnussen out on track.
Right.
You don't know what my next move is. I don't even know what my next move is. I'm a great team player. But I think that's who I would describe myself as. Have you done a lot of racing, obviously, being in this environment?
Have I done a lot of driving?
Have you been in the driver's seat?
Only like karting.
Not, you know, in single seaters or GT cars.
No, I've never ever thought that I'd be fast in a single seater.
Would you try it?
Absolutely. I actually feel like if I was going to choose a race car to drive, I'd want to drive like an LMP2 car.
Oh, okay.
I feel like they're a bit more rugged.
Yeah,
I can, you know, throw it about a bit more and not damage it too much.
They should do like a Red Bull, you know, get all the crew out and get them all in like different types of cars, single seaters and GT cars and all sorts, and then just to see what happens.
That would be so much chaos.
Absolute carnage.
It would be so much chaos.
I'd love to. Red Bull, if you're listening,
Like
I'd love to see
even if we weren't all on the track at the same time, it would still be carnage. But if we were on the track at the same time, it would, well.
But people would expect you all to be really good, even though you don't do racing at all. But because you're in that environment, they're like, oh, they must be amazing out on track.
I mean, if we were to do that during the August break, I imagine you'd be looking at a lot of new faces for the rest of the season because I can only imagine there'd be some serious injuries.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to end it off. So what we do is we get the previous guest to ask the next guest a question.
Okay.
So Lawrence Barretto has actually sent a question for you.
Right.
And he said, what's the most random thing that's happened to you in a race weekend?
Okay, the most random thing that has happened to me in a race weekend was probably ending up in a bar in Japan
Okay.
with some sort of high-ranking Yakuza boss.
Wow. Okay. Very, very random.
So I can't remember what year it was. I don't know if it was 2022 maybe, where we cancelled Japan qualifying because of an incoming typhoon. Mm-hmm. So we did what a lot of us do when we get a day off unexpectedly, is we found our local bar.
Yeah, go out.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like, and we walked to this bar, and it's tiny, this tiny little bar that's only got like 4 seats and 1 table. And we were sat in there, and the rain was coming down, and we were all sat at this table. And then the owner of the bar, Al, came over, and he's like, "Oh, could you all move over there?" And we were like, "Yeah, no problem." We thought he was just closing up because of the rain. Mm. And then, literally, as he did it, these 4 like big BMWs pulled up outside the garage. Mm-hmm. these guys in suits get out and they make like a shelter of umbrellas from the car to the garage.
You're like, right, who's this?
Yeah, from the car to the bar, sorry. And this massive guy gets out. He's huge and he's got this really nice like pinstripe suit on, diamond encrusted watch, and like straight away like, who's this guy? And he tells Al to get everyone a beer in the restaurant. And then I noticed that the 3 guys that had the umbrellas, they sort of lined up outside the bar, just like in the rain. And then I noticed that they were all missing their little finger. And I was like, it was all a bit strange. And then I spoke to the Honda personnel in the garage the next day to tell them about it. And straight away, our chief mechanic, Yoshi, he said to us, "Oh, Calum, very, very dangerous. Yakuza."
Oh,
straight away, as soon as I told him about the little finger. And, so he bought us a beer. It was a nice afternoon.
And that's it. The beer, we'll take that.
That's
We're going.
Perfect. Cold Asahi bought by some sort of gang boss was quite nice. It was an odd Saturday.
That is very random. I really wasn't expecting that.
There you go.
I thought you were going to say like a tyre flew off and hit
No.
the head or something like that. That is absolutely mental. Has there been anything, in an actual like race setting, like in the garage or in the paddock or something like that?
I mean, I sort of think that anything's expected.
Yeah,
so
true.
Anything's expected in racing. There's been plenty of incidents over the last few years, but no, I can't say there's anything.
Nothing that you can pinpoint.
Not really.
All sorts.
No.
Every weekend there's just something chaotic.
Yeah, that's kind of how we live.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do the same with you.
Yeah.
Don't know who your next guest is, but you can ask them any question, personal, F1, not F1 related. You don't know if they're going to be, working in F1.
Yeah.
So any question that you'd like to ask our next guest.
If having a new Grand Prix in Africa meant that we had to get rid of Monaco, would you do it?
That's a good question.
Because I would.
Oh, Calum just gave us his answer there. It's difficult. I think a lot of people are ready to see Monaco go, aren't they? I love Monaco. Let's forget about the race, but qualifying and all the build up to it, beautiful. I love it. But that's
this
really
is the thing. I've never got to enjoy Monaco where I wasn't working,
Yeah.
and I imagine my opinion on it would change immediately.
Yeah.
It looks like a great time, but yeah,
really good
as someone
question.
working in the garages, I would absolutely scrap it.
Wow, I can't wait to see what the next guest has to say about that.
I want to know who it is.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us today, Calum. It's
You're
been
welcome.
a pleasure to talk to you.
Nah, and you, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mega.